Yeah, remember the name, Jas Takhar, best in the game. Mamba mentality in his own lane, so better pay attention to what he be saying. Get the message, ain't no question, giving advice for any investment. Welcome to the broadcast, the Jas Takhar podcast.
And we're live. Nikki, we're good to go, buddy. We're getting started. All right. And so very, very few times, as my viewers and listeners know, in fact, we're going on to now, I think this is like episode 224, 225. I don't have a lot of returning guests. It's not because I don't want to. It's just because, look, if the viewers and listeners are saying we want someone back over and over again because of maybe it was their journey, maybe it's their experience, maybe it's the tips and the strategies that they give, I obviously want to bring that value to you guys as viewers. And if you're taking your dog for a walk right now on the treadmill or driving, this next guest of mine, some of you will know him, but he hasn't been on the podcast, and that's a little dig on him because I've been asking him for the past couple of years. He hasn't been on the podcast for a few years, and by far, from my client perspective, as you guys and gals know, I have a real estate company with my business partner, the Greek guy that you see with me, the bald guy, Simos, and we've been doing that for coming up for 20 years. We have about a client base of a little over 11,864 people in our what we call our REC Insiders list. By far, this next guest is the one that people ask for over and over again. I don't know if it's his handsome looks. I don't know if it's what he has to say. Maybe it's both things. Welcome, Mr. Michael Sarracini.
Yes,
how you doing?
Thank you. And I felt bad on the drive in.
You should.
A little bit.
Good.
You know?
Okay.
We talked a year ago, and we talk all the time. We text. We were texting the other day. But I never get a chance to come here and be with you and be able to add value to your audience. So I'm so pumped to be here. I'm excited. I'm glad I got to make it out.
Brother, look, I mean, we were talking for whatever it was, like 3 minutes before we started, and you were just asking about how many people like actually come in person. I was like, well, Michael, majority, like 100% since I built out this studio is all in person. And for me, and I didn't feel it when you asked me, but I'm feeling it now because as I look over to you, I'm so blessed and so grateful that people take the trip. Even, majority of my guys and gals in terms of guests are in the GTA. But you didn't drive from the GTA. Like, it didn't take you 25, 35 minutes to get here today. And so you came from far away to join us, to bring the value. I got so much to talk to you about because it's been a while since we've given the value and all the nuggets and all the gems that the kids like to call them these days that we're going to be giving to our viewers and listeners today. But I want to get started kind of like way back.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever asked you this question. And I didn't even tell you I was going to ask you, and you know that. And our kind of quasi-live audience, big shout out to David Drew. I know he doesn't even probably like me calling out his name, but we're going to do it anyways. Obviously, we got Nikki on the ones and twos and our VP business partner in our academy, Alto, Laura Stewart here. Who are you like in high school? Like, what kind of guy were you? Were you more of like in the books? Were you more of like, for lack of a better word, like a jock kind of guy, like into the sports? Who was kind of Michael Sarracini, high schoolish? So I'm thinking, 15 to kind of 17, 18. Who was Michael at that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my personality, I'm an extroverted personality, but I not like a fame seeker. So I don't need to be popular, and I think that kind of translated into my high school days. Even when I was younger, like I like to meet people and be out there, but I didn't feel the need to be, the most popular kid. I wasn't in any sports or athletic, and I think if I could explain myself in one way, it's a rule breaker. I was a rule breaker, and I wasn't malicious or I wasn't like a bad kid, but I would I would push the line, I would break the rules, and realize later on that's just the entrepreneurial way.
Because did you get into a lot of shit for that, like with at home or with teachers?
Yeah.
Okay, continue. All right, I'm curious.
Police never brought me home.
Okay,
so,
good. No handcuffs, nothing. But okay.
Just like one of those mischievous kids that it's like,
I can see that in you.
He's up to shit disturbances. Everyone's walking this way, I'm walking that way. Everyone's on this side of the line, and I have to just be on the line or just over a little bit. So I was a rule breaker. I pushed the limits, and I feel bad for some of my teachers because I would have pushed them to the edge. And sometimes I do with my wife and my team. That's we're entrepreneurial. We break the mold. We don't sit within a certain status quo. And so one of the things that one of the times I realized early on I was an entrepreneur. And well, I didn't realize it till years later, but I started my first business in high school. Let me tell you about this, because this is really interesting. I came from a great middle-class family. My mom left work in order to raise a family, and my dad he was a chip delivery man, potato chips.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So he would go out, he'd work long hours, he would be back late at night, and he would always have potato chips that were like expired. They just go in the garbage because they can't sell them, right? They come off the shelf, they go in the garbage. And so he would let my friends and I have like potato chips. So he'd be like, it was like the greatest thing as a kid, right? Yeah. We just get to pick.
And
like,
you're eating them at
chips.
first at that age. Sure.
And we love them. We're eating them. And so I would bring them to school and I would give them to my closest friends. And I remember one day, one guy's eating them was like, oh my goodness, I would pay for these. And I'm like, light bulb went off. I'm like, wait a minute, somebody would pay for these. And then I observed like the cafeteria area where they had vending machines, and I realized that my product was in the vending machine it was $1 at the time. This was like, mid 90s, $1 at the time. And I said, well, what if I just sold them for 50 cents? They're expired, but I mean, it's best before. It's suggested best before.
Yeah, I like
eat
that.
them.
Yes.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
So I would bring them, and I had a box in my locker, and then people started buying chips from me. And so I started making money off of the chips. And then so the next step of what happened was I realized that everyone that would buy chips from me, they'd walk over to the vending machine and buy a pop. All right, they'd go and they'd pay $1 for a pop. So I said, well, why don't I have pop? Why don't I give my customer both of these things? And so I would go to the store, I'd buy a case of Coke and a case of Sprite. I'd have 2 options only. It's all that fit in my locker. Yeah. And I would sell those for 50 cents. So when someone would come and buy them from me, they'd buy a chip and a pop for $1, and my cost might have been 10 cents on that or something. And so I got known as the guy that would be able the supplier.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next step of what I did is I got a buddy. I rented a room. So I got a buddy and I said, I'll give you some of the money if I could use your locker. I realized that was my first experience of renting warehousing space.
And
right?
When you're talking about that, I'm thinking that was like your first time when you started to scale, not even the whole renting thing. So that was cool. Like I like that.
So I'm like, can I use your locker? It's like, I need my locker. I'm like, what if I just give you some money? And I didn't realize that, I didn't know business. I didn't know like you rented a space in order to do business. And years later, I realized that I had a wholesale price of a product. I had a retail price. I had customers. I had distribution. I had warehousing space. And I was a step away from starting to build my team.
Yeah.
So my next step would have been to get my friends to say, you like the chips, right? Yeah. How about you go and you sell them, and then I will give you a percentage of what you bring in. And I was so close to having a sales team, and then the school found out. And it turns out it's illegal to run a business out of your locker.
Yeah, especially if they have vending machines right down the hallway, right? I love this because I know how much of a company, an organization, one of Canada's, if not North America's largest real estate investment coaching companies around. We're obviously going to get into that. Majority of people now that know you, they know you for this organization, which is called Keyspire. But again, we're going to go into that. But before, it's funny. Some people would have continued down that path. You didn't.
No.
You went into like almost the exact opposite
Yeah.
of that. What happened there? Like why? What was that and why?
Yeah, so I think it starts by a good lesson of not recognizing an innate ability that you might have. And this is something that even as adults, you could get to 60 years old, and if you don't have awareness, you don't recognize your ability that directs your path, right? So having this innate ability, which I just had this ability to push the limits just enough, kind of, do something and ask forgiveness later in a good way. But no, I went down. I was also very enamored with science. I'm a big science geek, and I absolutely love it because I'm very curious. So when I ended up going to university, I wanted to be a doctor. So I ended up going into pre-med and getting into that course, which, like you said, is the opposite of being entrepreneurial, right? Like it's really going down a structured career path, very bureaucratic, very process-driven and rule-driven, which I would have absolutely hated. I wouldn't have lasted in that world, not because I didn't want to practice the craft, but just the environment for entrepreneurs like us has to be right. Mm-hmm. And often what you'll see is people that are entrepreneurial, and anyone listening and watching, think about it. In what cases or times have you created your own environment, right? Like think about your entrepreneurial journey. We create the environment that suits us because we don't fit We don't belong in the world, in the environment.
And a lot of people, just with what you're saying there, Mike, like a lot of people, they allow that to become their norm, though, right? It's like, because I don't fit, now I want to try to fit, instead of going all in and understanding, well, it's okay if I don't fit maybe in this mold of science, for example. However, well, maybe I might be good at building a team, right? So like, people don't, in my opinion, change fast enough because they're sometimes worried about what other people are going to say. Well, there he goes again. There she goes again, changing her industry. I think of Alto a lot when we're talking about something like that, because she's probably changed, 67 times her mind when it comes to what industry she wants to be in and what she wants to do. But I actually look at that from a strength perspective, because you said it earlier, there's that self-awareness, right? And I just hope more people, because they're listening to what you're saying, because of the content that I put out there, they're okay with understanding that it's okay to change your mind.
Yeah. And this is the value of the service that guys like us provide. I mean, we could show you how to run the numbers on a real estate property. We could show you how to build a portfolio all day, but none of that matters if we can't get you thinking a little bit differently, right? Getting you to that point where you have that awareness, and probably a better word is you have that permission to be yourself, to be entrepreneurial. And really, the root cause is the structure in society that we live in. We're trained, and most families, most families are like, okay, get a good job and go to school, and you're going to have either a pension, or the government will take care of you, or it'll all work out at 65 or 60 or whatever. And that doesn't work right now. It worked at one point, like post-war, 50s and 60s, that worked. It was a different environment. But people are running the old model. Too many people are running the old model in today's world. And it's like running Windows 95 on your computer today when you need whatever the newest Windows is.
Well, right? I love that. I've never even that's such a basic analogy, but it's in those basics that I think we can all really relate to. But it's exactly what's happening, right?
Yeah.
To think that the government is going to be there for you in the next 20, 30, 40 years at that 65, and then sometimes it's 69, whatever it is. I don't even think there's going to be any money there from a pension perspective. Like, there's not going to be what everyone's waiting to do, which is retire because they're going to get that pension. I don't think that's going to really be there. But we're going to get into that because what you coach on, what you help people, and now you're not, it's not in the hundreds, it's in the thousands upon thousands of people that you've coached to get out of this, what I call the rat race of life. But then you had another switch. And Nikki, we are going to throw our boy a little under the bus today, because when we're in post-production, you're going to make sure that we showcase this. Our boy here wanted to start a boy band, and actually did start a boy band. What the heck happened with that?
My goodness,
so, like, you go into, like, this is the NSYNC and Backstreet Boy kind of time frame. Like, well, how did this all start? Like, this whole boy band stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, most people think I've been a real estate investor from day one, and I haven't. I was a pop and chip dealer. I had a number of businesses. I had a business. I had a great online business that sold squash equipment. Like, so I've run a lot of businesses throughout my life. Some succeed and some don't. Some are illegal and some, like the chip one, wasn't. And you learn that the hard way. But I think the very first business where I really was at an age where this was the future was when I was about 20 years old, and I wanted to be rich like most 20-year-olds, and it was about money and being out there and doing all these great things. And so I did what you would expect, is I started a boy band.
That is so out there. Continue. So what? Yeah. Like, how did that all come about?
So me and a couple friends of mine, we were roommates in a house, and we just decided to start a boy band. We said, hey, why don't we just learn to sing and dance? I had never sung in my life. I never danced in my life. I haven't sung or danced since. Every time.
So we're not going to get you to do that, okay? I won't do that to you.
You don't want to do that. I mean, we could, but you don't want to see that.
Viewership's going to drop, Michael. I'm sorry.
And so we said, well, let's just do it. I mean, this is the entrepreneurial mindset. This is giving yourself permission to do something that most people would not do. And the reason people laugh when I tell them that story is because it's so outside of the mold. It's so outside of the norm that we're trained to just do what you're supposed to do, follow the linear path, that whenever you hear a story of someone going in a different path, it seems ridiculous because that's not what you're supposed to do. And so it's just like the pop and chips business. It's well, why aren't we supposed to do it? Ask yourself the question, why not?
Why not? Oh God, I love that
Why
you're
not?
saying that, because we get it all the time as entrepreneurs. You've heard it so many times yourself, Michael, like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why do you think you can invest into real estate? Why are you putting yourself out there in terms of content through videos and podcasts? Why are you starting a boy band? Why not? Give me a good enough reason why not. And most of the time it comes down to, if even someone has an answer, they'll say something along the lines of, well, what if you fail? Mm-hmm. Right? And you said it earlier. I think you have I know you have this mindset, which is you're just failing forward all the time. Yeah. Is that safe to say, Michael? Like, you're just generally failing forward, like finding out what happened, readjusting along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, what I learned, I was with my mastermind group the last couple of days, and one of the things that came up is a statement that I think is appropriate, is there's only winners and learners.
Ooh.
Right? You're either winning or you're learning. You're not failing, you're learning. So failure is a gift. When you fail, even if you lose money like I've failed in things where I've lost money, all gifts so that I can learn how to not lose money again, and more importantly, do the opposite to make money. So as soon as you see failure as a gift, as opposed to something that is not supposed to happen, your whole perspective changes, and your whole relationship with healthy risk changes as well.
Okay, now, 2023, going into 2024 at the time of this recording, a lot of people are concerned about what's happening in the real estate market. It would be weird if I didn't get your take on the real estate market. You know your shit when it comes to this. You've been teaching it. You've been an investor yourself, which is very important for me to emphasize, because somebody might be new to the podcast. I and my team do the best we possibly can. We're not perfect. We generally do not have anybody on this couch that is not doing it themselves, or they haven't done it themselves. You can't just be talking about helping people invest into real estate if you've never invested. And I am very comfortable in saying I got one of the top guys on this couch right now is you, who's done this over and over and over again. Not the coaching aspect only, but I mean the actual investing into real estate. Yeah. And so what a lot of people are concerned about is exactly what's going on in the market. But parents, which are, my viewership also skews to that 55 to 60-year-old kind of range as well for the podcast specifically, are really concerned about their kids getting their first property, like actually home ownership. Before you speak about how you might be able to do that as someone who's in their 20s, get that first one, what did you do to get your first property? Because I think that might be an insight for people, because they can also use that strategy now, I believe. But you might have something else in terms of strategy and tactics. But what did you do to get your first property?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, it's impossible for me to do that, not answer one without the other, because it's the same answer.
Okay, I love it.
It's the same answer.
Yeah.
So what a 20-year-old needs to do today is the same thing I did 23 years ago when I was 20 years old. It's the same thing, because I'm bumping up into the same challenges that people are bumping up into today. So we'll talk about today's market in a moment. Let's talk about the way that I overcame this. So, all right, boy band. Here we are, boy band. And we worked really hard. So it takes hard work. It takes luck. It takes luck is a part of it as well. Hard work is a part of life, and having that ability to have the awareness and break the mold. So we started practicing, and then we started getting gigs, first friends' backyard, like little sister's backyard parties kind of thing. And then we started doing street festivals, and we started doing more and more until eventually we were at these variety concerts with thousands of people. I don't know if you've seen some of these pictures.
I've seen some of the pictures. Yes, I know.
Thousands of people, televised shows across the country. And then we started getting TV interviews and newspaper interviews. And then we got a record label we signed with. We went down to Nashville. We were touring studios of where we're going to record our first album. We had 3 songs at that point, and we had working with different songwriters in order to put ideas. So it was like we were
the dream's becoming a reality at this point.
Becoming a reality.
Okay.
Right? And at 20 years old, I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen anything. I've never been flown to Nashville before. I drove to Florida with my parents in the back of the Jeep, right? That's my that's the biggest trip I've been on. A hotel room. So it was amazing.
Recording studios, this shit's getting real at this point.
Floating floors. I'm like, Britney Spears was recording in one, the day before. This is real, right? And so top of the world. And, the higher you are, sometimes the more opportunity there is to fall. So you just got to be prepared for that. So we got back from Nashville, and a couple of days later, we got a call from the record company, and they said, guys, it's over. We're going bankrupt. We're closing down, and we have to drop all of our talent. And overnight, we went from the highest of the highs to, at the time, the lowest point in my life. The biggest loss I had ever had was putting in all this work and probably more importantly, having all this hope and this vision for the future that was erased overnight. And so without that record label, it went back to being backyard parties and street festivals. And
Did you guys go back to that at that time?
No.
Okay.
Done.
So this pit in your stomach at that point, it's not even wanting to throw up, I'm sure. It's almost like, fuck, my life is over. You're 20 something at that time. 20 years old. Those, days, weeks, months, years, how long did it take you to get yourself back up again? And how did you do it as well?
Yeah. So the first thing I learned a lesson, came to a realization, a lesson, something I carry with me today in my life. I said, I never want to put my future in somebody else's control again. So I realized no matter how hard I worked, no matter how good I was at singing, and I wasn't very good, no matter how hard I worked in life for this task or this moment, as soon as my future is in someone else's control, in this case the record company, it doesn't matter what I do. Somebody else is controlling my destiny and pulling the strings. And I said, anything I do next, I want to make sure that it has a path for me to be in control, that I call the shots. And so nothing happened for a couple months. We lived together. The 5 of us lived in a house, and we had fun, and it was great. And, we decided not to continue. I mean, the other guys had to get jobs, right? I was still in school, and my business partner today, Scott, was in the boy band as well, and he was still in school. So we're still in school. So we're like, all right, I'll just go back to school, and something will present itself. But I was aware. I had the pain, and sometimes you only find the solution when you have enough pain. You need that pain to find the pleasure, to find that solution. So we had pain, and I don't think if we didn't have that pain, I'll just speak to myself. If I didn't have that pain, I would have never seen the solution, which is real estate. And can I tell you how we found this solution?
100%.
So it was about a couple months later, and it was mine and Scott's responsibility to bring the checks to the bank, the cash and checks. This is before the days of e-transfer, and this is like the year 2000. So it's like you carry a check to the bank and you write the account number on the back, and that's why for a decade we called it checks to the bank day, because today I don't know if you even bring checks to the bank. It's
not really.
Transfer,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
That saying kind of lost its vogue when the world evolved.
And just so my people understand, you're a renter. You and Scott at this time are renter. You just rent a property because you go to school there, right?
Yeah,
okay,
we rented an off campus because we went to school. Yeah,
okay.
great context. And we were living with 5 guys. So we would collect the money. It was $2,000 a month, 5 guys times $400. And we would walk it to the bank, sometimes both of us, sometimes one of us, and the bank was a 10-minute walk away. So we went to the bank a couple months later, and we walked, and we went, and we deposited the money. The teller then, she said, okay, great, here's your receipt. Thank you, got the receipt. And we never pay attention to the receipt. Who cares, at 20 to throw it out.
Yeah, whatever.
Right? So we're walking back, and I look at the receipt, and I'm like, okay, $2,000, perfect. And then I'm like, what is this? It says mortgage, $800. We ended up, the landlord is out of town, and he ended up not giving us the account number, but making us a payee on the mortgage. So the statement that she printed was more information than, I don't think this would happen today with privacy and stuff. Like back then, it was like, oh, sure.
Yeah,
you want,
for
right?
sure. It was almost like an oversight from the bank that happened.
Yeah,
okay.
and the privacy, so mortgage, $800. I'm like, Scott, what do you think this is? He's like, I don't know. Like, we don't know what a mortgage is. Never heard that. Maybe you heard my parents say that. He's like, I think he only pays $800 for the house. I'm like, well, why are we paying $2,000? A few moments of silence went by, and then the light bulb went off. Holy shit, we need to be on the other side of this equation. And that was the second aha moment. The first was being in control, created the pain, and then because of that pain, the opportunity that was there every month, right? This is there every single month. It was the same opportunity. But without that pain, without that awareness, we would have never seen it. So we said, let's dedicate the next year to being real estate experts, to buying real estate. And
let's
so
be
that's
him.
Where
let's be the landlord.
Let's be on that side of the equation. So that's where real estate came in.
Okay, now, so what is the next step that you took at that time then?
So at that point, then you get a little stall because we didn't know what to do. And this is anyone who's watching that wants to be more entrepreneurial, unlock that part of them. don't start with the how, start with the why and then the where. You know, the why was the first part. I had to be in control of my future. And today our purpose at Keyspire, our purpose to put people in control of their future, it resonates, it threads through every part of my life. From that trauma, I'll call it. And I'm going to misuse the word trauma, but relatively speaking in my life. So it started with the why, to be in control. After the why, it's, well, what and where? You know, where are we going? We want to be wealthy. What are we going to do? We're going to do real estate. The how doesn't come to the end.
Oh, God.
Right?
It's so important.
Trying not to get bogged down in that how was so important.
So many people get bogged down in that, though, right? Like when you talk about the why and the how, and what I like to also speak about is making sure that you have 100% clarity in the what. What is it that you're looking for? Because the universe will give you what you're looking for at all times. Unfortunately, if you're looking for negative and you're thinking about negative, that's the vibration that you're always putting out there. It doesn't know or care, it being universe, God, whatever you want to call it, that higher spiritual being, it will always give you more of what you focus on. But most people focus on, well, how am I going to do that? And to your point, the how will actually, it's already there. You're just not looking for it because that front part of your brain, that reticular activator system has not been turned on yet. And so I have a funny feeling that what started to happen is when you guys, yourself, Scott, started to say, okay, this is what we want to do. We know why we want to do it. I have a funny feeling things started to come, like you started to see all these things happen in front of you. Is that kind of what happened?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It is the exact mechanism that happened. And the way I describe it to people today, I say, your brain is like a Google search engine and the world is like the internet. There is just too much information. You cannot open a web page and see all the information. So you need some sort of filtering mechanism, and you put words in a little bar, and that's the filtering mechanism. Our brains work exactly the same, just the filtering mechanism is a little bit different. We don't have words in a search bar. We have thoughts, and we have our time alone. We have our thoughts. We have our focus. That's our search engine. So if you focus on a certain car, you're going to see that car every day. If you focus on, there's so many examples. Whatever you focus on is what presents itself. And if people think about their brain as a search engine, then you think about every day, what are you programming into that search engine? What are you typing in? To your point, if you're going to type in negative thoughts, if you're single and you're like, I can't get a date, I'm ugly, I can't get a date, and nobody likes me, you're going to find situations that prove that nobody like you. That's what your brain's going to find. Every moment of that day where somebody doesn't like you. Because there's going to be 10 moments that prove somebody doesn't like you, and there's going to be 10 moments that prove that somebody loves you and somebody does like you. Same thing with real estate. If you want to say, I can't invest in real estate, you'll find evidence. Either way, it's the psychology of cognitive bias.
Yes.
Cognitive bias says that no matter what you believe, you will find evidence to support your point. If you believe climate change exists, you'll find 10 points why it does. If you believe it doesn't exist, you'll find 10 points why it doesn't. There's evidence to support any belief you have. So then the question is, what belief do you have? And let's just find the evidence to support the positive belief.
And social media's algorithms, people are blaming social media for a lot of things. And I understand maybe some of it, not all of it, though. And this is where I completely disagree with anybody who talks about social media from a negative perspective, is that, it's putting out so much of the negativity in the world. No, the algorithm works in a way, it will give you more of what you're actually looking at. So to your point, Mike, when you're saying if you are thinking about like to prove that, there's something wrong with, climate, or if you're saying, well, no, there's really not a massive problem, you'll get the 10 reasons why and why not. And a lot of it comes from the algorithms and social media, because if you're looking at negative shit all the time, it's just going to feed you more of that. So let's go back, because I really think that was important for sure, because people need to know finding the what and the why.
Yeah.
Now let's touch a little bit on how we've seen other investors and personally ourselves on how we can actually get into a market like this. And so you guys at that time, yourself and Scott, went back. Okay, now you started to realize we want to be the landlord. We want to be real estate investors. Was it a matter of like literally pooling money together? What did you guys actually do to get the first property?
Yeah. So let's walk. So we're at the point where we've got, we're looking for the how.
Yeah.
We got the why, we got the what. And so it starts with the how. So it took, by memory, it took about 8 months to get to that first property. And that's working hard. And we were very disadvantaged compared to where people are starting today. And the reason I say that is because back then there was no internet. I mean, the internet had just started. It was just basically some news outlets that were local. There was no Keyspire like our company.
No educational
company. There's no groups. There was no ways to even connect with a group unless you put an ad in the paper, which I ended up doing a few years later. You put an ad in the paper, meet up at like the wherever.
There's coffee shop.
Tim Hortons, the parking lot.
Yeah.
So it didn't. Today, the opportunities for new real estate investors are just through the roof. Speaking from experience, somebody that started without any of these opportunities. So we figured out we had to figure out a way to learn, and so we had to do the old-fashioned way, which is talking to people. That's the old-fashioned way, networking, talking to people. So we were fortunate enough that we were both worked at a restaurant. And we noticed that on lunch shifts, half the people came in with realtors. Realtors love to go for lunch. Sure. I don't know if you
makes sense.
Do realtors just go for lunch every day or what? Like it's
and
half their marketing.
Most of the time,
lunch.
it's a liquid lunch too.
Yeah.
So, but yes,
when they show up at like 1:30, 2 o'clock, you know that
you know what it's turning into. Yeah,
and the information's gonna flow.
Tequilas and vodkas.
So every time, we were aware enough that every time a realtor came in and we found out, we would say, "Oh yeah, we're interested in buying a property," and half of them would try and sell us, more than half would try to sell us like our first home. We're like, no, we don't want our first home. We want to buy like investment property, like something that we don't even know what to call it. Later on, the term income property came out, which stuck into a TV show, and we still use today. We want to buy property, and so most realtors didn't really give us the time because we're young guys, we had no money, but we had one realtor, and she said, "You guys could do that." She had a couple sons our age, and so she was very helpful. And she said, "Well, why don't we go look at properties?" We're like, "Okay, why not? Right? Why not? What do we have to lose?" And so we went to look at properties, and we realized how in over our head we were and overwhelmed. And she's like, "No, don't worry. I got a stucco guy, I got a paint guy, I got a this guy." So all of a sudden, it became a little less overwhelming because now there are people that can do these things. We don't have to do all of these things. So we ended up finding a property, and it was like perfect. And she's like, "You could do a couple more bedrooms in the basement and rent them out." Gave us a strategy. I said, "Okay, what do we do now?" She's like, "Let's put in an offer." We're like, "Put in an offer?"
This is getting real now.
Yeah, no, we can't put in an offer. And she said, "Why not?" We said, "Well, why not? Like, what happens?" So you got to get educated too. What happens? She's like, "Well, if they don't accept the offer, then whatever, it just dies. And if they do, we'll put in conditions so that, it makes your financing and all of that. Give us a long conditional period at the time so that we could learn." So we put in an offer, and they accepted it. It was around $165,000 or so. And so we said, "Okay, great. Well, now what?" She's like, "Well, let me introduce you to my mortgage broker, and let's talk about getting the money." We're like, we need money to do this. Oh, shit. So we talked to the mortgage broker, and we couldn't qualify for financing, and we had no money. So we went home and we said, "Okay, well, we got the house for like another 40 days or so, 30 days. It was like a month conditional period at the time. Let's see if we don't know what to do." So we just went on with our life. And then the universe delivered because our RAS was programmed, because we knew that it was programmed to the filter. I didn't realize till years later, but we had programmer filter. We're looking for money. And I realized that every single day, almost every single day, money presents itself to us. Not only Michael and Scott as 20-year-old university students, but to you, to anybody out there, it's there. You just got to put in the search engine. So the mortgage broker in the search engine, a few days later, a few weeks, or within a week or so, we got our renewal for our tuition the next year. And with that came our student loan. And I'm like, okay, we got a student loan. And we had like the documents. I remember the documents were on the table together. It was like, here's the offer, and it's like, here's how much. You guys got to come up with $13,000. And then on the other side, we had, okay, here's your two student loans. They're like $7,000 each, so it's like $14,000. And we're like, oh my God, okay, we got the student loans. Where are we going to come up with the money? And they're like, it's like a joke, like a Saturday Night Live skit. The pages like overlapping, right? Like the universe is like, come on.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, one of us, I don't know who, so I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Said, why don't we just use this money to buy this, and we'll just work harder at the restaurant, we'll pick up more shifts to pay for the stuff that money that was going to go to housing anyway. So if we buy a house and it has some cash flow, it could cover our rent. But then if we work a little bit more, then because sometimes it takes more work, that was the aha. So we used other people's money to buy the first property, and it was the government's money. We used our student loan, other people's money to buy that first property.
And now this is transitioned to hundreds of properties. Like, I mean, you guys started to really go into doing this essentially over, like rinse and repeat, right?
Yeah,
like
that's a
over
great
and
story
over
too.
again.
That's an interesting one.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Like, what was the next one? And then how did you really start to build out that portfolio?
Yeah, so then it's okay. So we got the money. There's the first one. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle, as we know, right? But money is a big one, but it's not the only one. There's other resources that are needed. And, you know, anyone who's listening thinking that I don't have the money, their job is to say, well, what resources do you have? Because people that have the money, today I have the money, but I don't have these other pieces like the time, or there's other pieces I don't have. So I need you just as much as you need my money. And I think people need to understand that they don't have money today. There's people that need whatever you're bringing. So being very clear, at Keyspire, we call it your UVA, your unique value add. Be very clear. And we have activities that we go through with our coaching members to say, what is your unique value add? The limited resource you bring that somebody else might want. And then just pairing it at that point. So we got together, we both brought money, we both did the time, we bought the property, and we needed money for the renovation. So we did all the work ourselves. We learned on Sunday mornings at Home Depot University.
And you don't really come from like a handy background, do you, Michael? No, and did Scott
neither
at that
of us.
time?
No.
So like this whole hammering shit and fixing stuff, that's not something that you ever, you had to learn it.
We had to go learn
I never knew that about you.
Yeah, no, never. We had to go learn it. I remember the first sheet of drywall I hung it backwards. I didn't know there was two sides.
Sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Why would you think there's two sides of drywall if you've never hung it?
Right.
I had to hire a guy to do the mudding and taping. He comes in, he's like, it was like a freaking checkerboard. He's like, you got to take half of these off. I'm like, oh shit. So it took me twice
And
as
you
long.
couldn't YouTube shit back then.
No YouTube. No.
Right? Okay.
No, it's like go to the library and get a book.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah,
with no pictures or with like drawings because it's the year 2000.
Yeah.
So bought the property. We used credit cards to pay for the materials. We got the 90-day, no money down, 0% interest. And we said, okay, if we can take this property, fix it up, and sell it within 90 days, we'll just pay off the credit cards. Because that was the model at the time, flipping properties. All the shows, flipping properties. This is what you do. This is how you make money. You buy, you fix it, and you flip it. So that's what we were running because that's what we thought the model was. So we said if we would sell the property, pay it off, pay off the credit cards, and then we would make some money, whatever the profit is. So we finished the renovation. We rented it. We had modeled after our house. We had 5, maybe 6 people in there. So there was 6 in that one. So $2,400 a month it was making. Now we were making $2,400, and our mortgage was maybe $1,000, a little bit more of an expensive house. So we had put ourselves, goal achieved, right? Win. We are now on the other side of this equation, and that was such a great moment after all that adversity and all that work. So we went back to the mortgage broker, and we said, okay, we did it. We've renovated the house. Doesn't need to be fixed up for like 5 years. We've got it rented. Somebody's going to love this house. It's got a cash flow. It's newly renovated. It's in a great neighborhood. It's going to go up in value. Somebody's going to love this house. It's so good for someone else. So how do we sell it now? Right? So what do we do? How do we break the mortgage, or what does that even mean? So he said, wait a minute. You just told me you just renovated the house. It's going to be good for 5 years at least without any work. It's cash flowing $1,200 a month, great neighborhood, and it's just a great property. Why would you sell it? And we looked at each other like, well, isn't that what you do? You buy them and sell them. And, it's just a lesson in terms of break the mold. Don't go down the path that everyone says you have to go down. Think outside the box. That term is overused, but, think outside the status quo and just kind of feel what feels right. So, and talk to people when you can't figure it out. So we weren't stubborn enough to say, well, no, we're going to flip it. That's what you do. We looked at each other. We're like, yeah, what if we just kept it? Then that money would cover our rent. And we said, well, what about the rest of the money? Like, what about the check? We're supposed to get a check. He said, no, here's what we'll do. You increase the value, so we'll get it refinanced I said, refi what? We get it refinanced, so we get the new value at the bank sets it at the new value, and now you can go 95%. Back then it was 5% down. 95% loan to value. I'll get you a check for 25 grand, and you get to keep the property and the cash flow. And you know what? We did a 25-year amortization. We'll do a 30-year amortization, so your payment won't even go up. We said, wait a minute. We get to keep the house. We put in 15, we get 25 back. Okay, we got to pay some credit cards, but we get 15, we get 25 back, and we keep a cash flow of $1,000 a month forever? He's like, yeah, that's a refinance. I said, holy cow. So I remember I looked at Scott. I said, we're not going to flip this property. We're going to flip it to ourselves. And that's where flipping to ourselves was born. It was a strategy where we would take a property, we would improve it, get it appraised at the higher value, take our money back out. And then what do you think we did with our 25 grand?
Well, you could have went to Vegas. You could have went to Niagara Falls, put it on black or red.
Yep.
I know you guys didn't do that. You bought another one.
And
is that
rinse and repeat?
And that was the rinse and repeat. Now, someone's watching and listening to this, and they heard you say a couple of numbers. And I think the one that's going to really jump out at people is that first property was 160.
Yeah, 160,000.
160,000. Now they're like, well, Michael, Jas, like, I get it. But now that same property is probably 750 grand or 800 grand off the top of my head, right? How does somebody do that in today's market, though, now?
Yeah.
Is what they're sitting and thinking.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the overall strategy is flipping to yourself. So it's the matter of, people ask me, how do you save up? At the 20th house, people said, how did you save 20 down payments? I said, I didn't. I borrowed one. And I used it 20 times. And they're like, holy cow. Because you can't save. So getting in today's market, like back then you could save $15,000. Like if you really worked hard, I mean, even inflation adjusted, you could save $15,000. Today, what is $100,000 down to buy a house? Like 150? Like if you're trying to save $150,000 to buy your first down payment, it's going to take you 20 years. So you need a different approach. You have to use a different approach if you want those results. So trying to save your down payments just doesn't work in today's market. I mean, generally, you could have a great job and making money and inheritance, whatever, but
the average person can't do it.
The average person,
it's safe to say that. Yeah,
saving a down payment is tough. So what somebody can do today, and this is something that I've been talking about a lot with people, is how does Gen Z actually buy a home? Somebody that's 20 today. Like I was 20 years old, how do they buy a home? Our typical coaching member is 45 to 60, 65, 40 to 60. So they have different challenges than the Gen Z, but they all have kids. A lot of them have kids that are Gen Z. So it comes up in our community a lot, like, how do I take care of my kids? Like, I get it, I'm going to be okay, but short of just giving them money, how do I help them? So here's what people can do learning from my story. Right? You can't copy what I did. You can't copy what we did because it's a different time. You have different resources. There's different things, opportunities available for everyone. But number one, how we come up with the money, and number two, how we afford the house are the same. So coming up with the money is other people's money. It's creatively finding other people's money. And so we do an exercise at Keyspire called capital stacking. So we say if a house is $1 million, we'll just use that number, what are the components that get you up to $1 million? So the most common is 80% mortgage, 20% down payment, 20% cash. And that cash comes from your pocket. Well, what if you don't have 20% cash? You don't have $200,000, which is almost everybody. So then you have to use different tools in order to come up with that $200,000, or different, what we call them, funding building blocks. So we have a series of 8 building blocks that our members use in order to create capital stacks. So some examples of building blocks might be a line of credit, right? So you can get a line of credit. A lot of people can get a line of credit for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 unsecured just based on your credit history. So that might be a building block for one person, but maybe not for another. Some people might have an income property already where you can get private lending on. So that might be a building block. And then the most sustainable building block is private equity, which is bringing in a partner. So having somebody come in, they put down the money, they put down the down payment. The bank uses the capital stack of the mortgage, so 80% mortgage, 20% down payment, and you provide your unique value add, your unique resources in exchange for that money, so you're both contributing. That's exactly what Scott did. Neither of us had the money on our own to buy the property, so we both brought a resource of money, we both brought a resource of putting in the work, and we both brought the resource of structuring the deal, and we shared all of that 50-50. Now that could have very easily been one of us brings all the money and the other one brings all of the work in structuring the deal. So it's just how you slice this partnership to create that capital stack.
And you know, even within that, Michael, like let's just say somebody who's watching, listening right now, they don't have the 200,000, but they might have the ability to actually get the 800,000 in financing because of their credit history. They do have a strong job, but they don't have the 200,000. And so sometimes you might even be able to do you bring in Nicky, he has the 200,000, and then if you as the viewer that's listening and watching right now, you have the ability to get the financing. Yeah. You get the financing and you can still go 50-50 on that deal, right?
Yeah.
Like, so even, I love this capital
stacking.
Capital stacking. It's new. You and I have been doing this for coming up to a decade now.
I haven't talked about this, have I?
You have not talked about this one. So I'm very, very glad that you brought it to us today. What are maybe like one other way that you can start to raise money as well?
Okay, so we'll go down the theme of capital stacking. And I should actually mention in the story, we did need to bring in another partner on that first property to qualify for financing.
See, there you go.
Right, so people are saying, well, that's great, but how do you qualify for the mortgage? It's only 160,000, 95% of 160,000, but still we didn't qualify because we were broke students. We didn't have no money, we had negative money, right? Anyone have negative money? Yeah. So we had to bring in a partner, and the partner that I sold on qualify for financing was my dad.
Oh, perfect.
Original business with the chips.
Yes.
Comes back around. So I have to thank my dad every time. If he did not co-sign for us on the financing, we would have never bought that first property. I mean, I'm sure we would have found a way.
Yep.
So often what people will do is if they can't qualify for financing, you bring in a partner. It's just a piece of the puzzle. Like everyone carries a piece of the puzzle to the table, and then you just split the pie up based on the pieces of the puzzle. Like it's not complicated.
And 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my dad was a zero profit partner.
Even
he's
better.
like, he's Italian. He's like, I'll just help
No
you.
problem.
Just no problem. But what we've seen our members structure is the kids will buy a property and then they'll cut the parents in as a percentage of cash flow for like a period of time. So for example, you'll get 15% of the cash flow over 3 years, and after 3 years, the deal is done. And all of that just for a signature to co-sign. So I tell that because there's ways to structure the deal. Be creative. Create a royalty for someone. Imagine, Jas, I said, look, if you co-sign on this property for me, I'll give you 15% of the cash flow for the next, or of something, the equity, the cash. We're going to refinance in 3 years. I'll give you 5% of that just for signing. And then after 3 years, then we're done. I've paid you off fully. And you're like, I could be fully passive just for co-signing. Yeah. And then if we don't pay the rent or whatever, you own the property. You just get the property. And so it's a pretty good deal. You got security and cash flow.
And the most people that I come across from my client base, they like to think they want to do what you and Scott did in terms of fixing properties. Mm-hmm. Because it looks cool. Like it looks good. Like and especially the one when you guys sometimes speak about like people do flip them. So you buy it, you renovate it, and then you do actually sell it, not flip it to yourself. Yeah. It actually looks cool, but I always tell people, guys, it didn't happen in 22 minutes like they showed you on TV. That's not what happened. These guys went through a lot of work. They had to bring in a lot of people where most people want to start there, but you know where they end up, Michael, and I think you'll probably have seen it through your coaching as well, is they want to be passive. They want it to be passive. Like, let me just kind of sit back. I have some money. I have the ability to get financing. Maybe I can bring a deal to the table. I actually don't want to really do the work. I don't want to deal with the tenants and toilets. But then on the flip side, there's so many people that actually don't mind dealing with the tenants and toilets. You just got to get together and put those deals together, right?
Yeah.
So now, after all this, you guys have built a massive portfolio. You guys start now teaching other people. Yeah. I really want to spend a little bit of time with you because I have been with your organization for coming up to a decade. And so you're not here because I'm with your organization. You're here because I know how much value you bring through the organization, which is Keyspire. But how did that start? Like, how did you guys transition into like teaching this to other people?
Yeah, it follows the pattern of thinking outside the box, thinking outside the mold, having your brain programmed, your search engine programmed to find something that's always there. So there's a couple things that happened around 5 years into the business. I had reached a point that we call it Keyspire Lifestyle Freedom Day. Lifestyle Freedom Day is our ultimate goal for each of our members. It's the day where your passive income equals your lifestyle expenses. All right, Lifestyle Freedom Day. And we do that over the 3 investing streams: property, private lending, and private equity. And there's even a way, in private equity, sometimes you don't get paid for 3 or 4 years, or same like pre-construction condos. There's a multi-year. So you have to use a laddering strategy to time them so that so there's strategies. Anyone who's watching that's like, you can't make a passive income out of it. Well, you can. You got to have the right strategy. So that's the ultimate goal. So around 5 years in is when I hit that for me. And, I wasn't married and no kids, but I had more than enough money to do the things I wanted. I was traveling. It was fun. So I had time to do stuff. Right? So we started doing different things. And one of the things that I really love doing is helping my family and friends buy real estate. Because by this point, at the beginning, they're like, hey, you're crazy. What are you doing? You can't buy real estate. My friends are like, you're 20 years old. They can buy real estate. Like you, and
thinking of you as the chip dealer still. You know what I mean? Like, come on, this is some nonsense you're doing again.
I tell you, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, they tell you you're lucky. Right? So everything in between is the unique value that you create. My parents always believed in me, though, and that's what helped me break outside the mold. That's what helped me say, okay, I can do it. Even though I was I won't say a bad kid. Even though I pushed the rules and I broke the rules, they still managed to allow me to have the sort of, the latitude. So that's really important to have some sort of support group. Today, we do that with our mastermind group at Keyspire because not everyone is fortunate with parents like mine. So we have a mastermind group where people will actually support each other and be that foundation to say, yes, I can do something different. So, anyone find a group, find a tribe, even just a partner, a business partner.
So much easier now, right? I know we've said it a couple of times,
yeah,
but it's important. Like back when you guys did this, you could not find these groups. Now, not only do you, if you're an introvert and there's just not like you don't want to go and actually meet people in person. I think that is the best, belly to belly stuff. But right now you can just do it virtually. You can even have your screen off. You don't need to let people see you on Zoom. You can work your way up there because there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of meetups that happen online. But sorry, buddy, I cut you off. I want you to continue.
So I really enjoyed helping people and some friends and watching them. I remember my first friend, Matt, he made like $100,000 on his property after 18 months. It takes time, but it went up in value. It was cash flowing. You just copied the model. Go in, buy this property. There's an unfinished basement. Finish the basement, put in 2 more rooms, refinance it, flip it to yourself, take that money, pay off. Same thing. It's still today. It doesn't change.
Yep.
It's the model. They about 10 years after we were doing it, this BRRR thing came out, which is what
yeah.
Which is like flip to yourself.
Exactly.
It's our flip to yourself strategy. So people call it all kinds of different things, but really you're flipping the property to yourself instead of someone else. That's the easiest way.
Buy and hold long term,
and you keep it.
You'll win 95% of the time.
So teaching this strategy, and I loved real estate, but then I realized that I just loved coaching people even more. I loved doing this. I loved adding value and explaining. And that's one of my unique abilities is a simplifier. I can take complex concepts and I can simplify them to a couple simple steps so that people don't feel overwhelmed. And I realized I had that ability when I was helping my friends and family buy real estate. And then I said, I want to do this. Why not? I want to do this with thousands of people. Like if I like it with one person, I want to do it with thousands of people. So at the same time, I was filming on the show Income Property. And Scott was the host and I was the project manager. And we were doing this model we're talking about for homeowners that they couldn't cover the payments. It was 2006, 2007, 2008. Same problems people are having today. These aren't new problems, by the way, in today's market. All right, people had these 100 years ago. They have them today. These are just problems. These are just life. This is just life. All right, you got to buy stuff and you don't have enough money. So what do you do?
Yep. Figure it out.
So we would go in and we would do the homes, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Income Property. And I made the decision to leave Income Property to start the coaching business, to start the coaching organization, Keyspire. So I left in 2008. I spent a year writing our first courses at Keyspire, which we call Cash Flow for Life. was going to call it checks to the bank at first, but at that point, checks were becoming less prominent. So it's cash flow for life, because I said, what is it that we're doing? We're creating cash flow for life is our goal. Whether it's through actual rental cash flow or it's through passive appreciation that you ladder properly, it's still, we want to get you paid every single year so that you can run your life. And then so that's where Keyspire was born. And I did my very first Keyspire speaking event. We partnered with a bunch of different people, had collaborations. We were all throughout the US and Canada. And in December 2010 is when I did my very first training in front of a group of about 100 people. It was 13 years ago now. And I mean, since then, it's been probably been over 100,000 people. And we have thousands of members. And we just kept getting better from that point. It was just me in my spare room at home. And now we've turned to, I mean, our team at one point was over 100 people all across North America.
Massive congratulations to you. Obviously, you've had a team that's all helped you through that as well. And what you learned back, in high school of building a team, you started to, I hope people got the theme as well. And they understand the journey in terms of sometimes the stuff that you learn when you're younger, you can bring that to when you're older and actually monetize it and help other people, which you did. I've been able to see you speak on stage for the past 10 years. I thought you were definitely really good back then. It is a really, now at this point, it's a sight to see. I could tell how much fun you're having up there. It's not scripted. You kind of have you have some notes on a screen, but you go off on a tangent in a good way because you bring so much passion to the people that are there. Were you scared that 13 years ago when the first 100 people, by the way, were you or did the boy band stuff kind of help? That experience with that, did that help you or?
No.
No? Okay.
No, it didn't help.
No,
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, terrifying, it's, but I was prepared.
Got it.
And, your performance is only as good as your preparation.
Yeah.
Whether you're an actor or you're an athlete or you're a speaker, you're a coach. So I do spend, I'm not scripted, but I am prepared. I'm prepared for what the audience is thinking. I'm prepared for the value that they want to get. I don't want to go up there and talk about turf management when somebody wants to learn about real estate.
Yeah.
That's a exaggerated example, but you've got to be prepared.
Well, now, so as somebody who's watching and listening, how do they get started in the world of Keyspire? Where would you want people to get started, and what can they expect as somebody that's in the world of Keyspire and wanting to learn? Yeah,
so there's a few different ways that we help people.
Okay.
The end, I always think of the end in mind. Where do I want to go? The top tier of what we do is our mastermind group, Keyspire Signature Mastermind Program.
Okay.
That's not for everybody though. So some people make it to the mastermind program. You have to apply and you have to qualify to get there. We meet quarterly. We do quarterly coaching workshops. We do monthly meetups. We do weekly focusing calls and all kinds of great stuff in between. Really just creating this, everything I just talked about is what I want to do for people. And we've built our program, mastermind program around that. But that's not for everyone. Maybe they're not at that right stage in life. Maybe that's not what they're looking for. So, when you go to the other end of our customer journey, we have a lot of free resources that people can have. Scott, my business partner, Scott, I point him like he's right here. Scott, I've been kind of telling the story like he's beside me the whole time.
That's great. That's hilarious.
So Scott here has created a masterclass, a free masterclass,
okay,
where he's going to walk through the 4 ways to win, which is a fundamental concept that we want people to know on the different ways that real estate makes money, your $1 million plan, a 10-year plan. So this is a free masterclass to get people introduced to Keyspire, to get people introduced to real estate, and to give them 3 tactical tools that whether they didn't go any further, they could use these tools and they could start to go down their path and their journey. And then, we also have our books. We have 2 amazing books, Cash Flow for Life and Quick Start to Cash Flow. Those are available Amazon, Kindle, and Audible. I did the Audible as my voice. So, right. And I throw gems in there. And
yeah.
So, we got the free masterclass. We've got some books.
And so would you say, Michael, like nobody's heard of Keyspire. They haven't even got into knowing if they should invest into real estate. They want to learn. They're scared. Is it the masterclass that you would suggest that they get started because it's free? They kind of get a good understanding of it. And is that the first place they should kind of get started, or is it keyspire.com? Like, where does somebody go actually?
Depends how ready they are. I'd say
Okay.
there's two options.
Okay.
You either, if you're curious,
Yeah.
you go to the master class.
Love it.
It's free.
Okay.
If you're more serious, you go to our 3-day boot camp.
Perfect.
We do a 3-day boot camp. We run them every couple months.
In person or virtual?
It's all virtual.
Okay.
We have a specific one for Canadians and a specific one for Americans because our community is North American.
Yes.
So I would say go to the boot camp. It's a few $100. It's a joke on how much value you get, and it's got 100% money back guarantee. So I mean, if people don't like it, we give them all their money back. So it's like
You have nothing to lose.
you have nothing to lose.
Nothing to
So
lose.
I mean, I'd say
No risk.
go to the boot camp, Keyspire.com, or right on our website. You'll find Learn to Earn Boot Camp.
And how do they get to the masterclass as well? Because I want to give people both options. I
Yeah.
want to get all the links, Nikki. Let's throw everything in there, as well as the links for the books as well. And if they want to hear his voice, we'll obviously send them to the Audible as well.
Yeah. So the master class is if you go to Keyspire.com, there's a little button that says Start Today.
Okay.
Just click on Start Today.
Easy.
And the link for the boot camp is Keyspire.com/join bootcamp.
Michael, brother, you know how I feel about you because we talk, off air. We don't just do these podcasts. But I really want to thank you today because the first time we did this, as I mentioned, we really didn't talk about the journey as much. And for me, the podcast is about helping people create wealth, get out of the rat race, help them create wealth, not only through real estate, but maybe it's business, maybe it's entrepreneurship. It could be stocks, it could be Bitcoin, whatever. I want to bring education to people, but I think most people learn, and this is just feedback I got from people, that when they actually hear someone's journey, but not everyone's willing to share it all the time, and you did today. And so not only want to thank you for that, but I want to thank you for taking the drive here and for everything that you do, because I know that you've been doing it for a while, going on stage, putting out content. I've been doing it half the time you've been doing it, so not as long as you. And it takes a lot, man. Like you gotta take, like the cheers are awesome, but sometimes the boos also are not as much fun, or you just had an off day, or you're just like, shit, maybe it didn't resonate, but you keep doing it. And for that, I want to thank you, not only from myself, but from my team and my clients, that we share a lot of people that we're helping create wealth for, and I want to thank you for that from the bottom of my heart, brother.
You got it. Thank you. And well, thank you for taking care of our members. I know so many of our members have done business with you, and you've helped them through your real estate action plan, the REAP.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The REAP. Through your real estate action plan, you help so many people, and some of them have gone on to be clients of yours, reoccurring, which is the biggest compliment you can have. And we hear so many great things. So I also want to thank you for taking care of our people, because we don't bring people in our community without really trusting them. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And it's funny because I don't think I've ever told you what I say to people on the phone, especially people from your community. Look, the one call I don't like getting, and I haven't got, is from you or Scott about like that we haven't taken care of someone. So that's the call that I don't want to ever get, because that's not a good call to have.
Yeah.
And I guess we're doing something right because you guys have kept us around for a decade. That's
Yeah.
how I usually talk to anybody in your community, that if you don't see us, that means we're not doing something right. So again, man, you're welcome for that. And make sure you have a safe drive back home, man.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Jess.